Well, this time it's going to be a little bit different because instead of Peter being opposite me, we are welcoming someone else that I have met fairly recently, I think it is, probably about 2 or 3 months ago, who was invited to our pub group. And I'm going to do a little bit of publicity for the men's pub group on a Wednesday night. We're called Blokes, Beer and Banter at Barippa, and we meet from 8 p.m. till 10 p.m. At the St Michael's Mount Inn in Barippa. And you're very welcome if you are in the category of being a male in a men's group on a Wednesday night. And in a way, they're just an extension of the little conversations we have here, where we go all over the place talking about all sorts of issues. And we've built a kind of little community, but it's not, we hope, cliquey. It welcomes anybody. And anybody who's listening to this is very welcome to come in on it. But James, who's here with me today, is one of those. And we thought it'd be lovely to get James in on one of these conversations. And so I'm going to ask him in a moment if he'll give a very brief resume of who he is. And I think we're going to unpack that in a much longer interview under another series we're going to do of kind of life stories in some way, shape or form. So just James, welcome to River Thoughts in its kind of third iteration. We would love you to say a couple of things about who you are.
Cool. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's nice to be here. You got lots of really good books around, so
Oh, a few.
if I start staring at them, I'm still listening. But I'm just interested in what I'm going to read. You know.
We could go off at tangents like that, James. I don't mind. Say to people a little bit about you.
But yeah, so my name is James. I've got bipolar affective disorder, chronic depression, and PTSD, and I'm an autistic person. I'm also an illustrator, a radio host. I play bass. I
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's worth me logging.
Yeah, I love music. I love art. I love poetry, theology, political theory, all sorts of things. I love tea. Like, of all the things,
We'll have a tea break after
tea
this
is
one.
like top of my list.
Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of me. You know?
That's a brilliant, very, very small summary of an absolutely fascinating guy, James here. I can't believe how lucky we are to have so many interesting and different people that we meet on a Wednesday night.
It's quite a prestigious group, really.
Oh, very prestigious, yeah. Ha ha. James and I are just going to talk about a topic. We've unlike some of the discussions with Peter, we've probably done a little bit of background on this one, but not a huge amount. And the one reason that we're going to talk about what we are going to talk about today, James, is that a few weeks ago I started reading biblically the book of Deuteronomy, which is quite a long and complicated book. It's basically a sermon. And in that book, one thing that really hit me was the number of times it said, I don't know whether you've noticed this, James, at all, it said something about aliens and foreigners and strangers. And I couldn't believe how many times in different sections of the book it talked about welcoming and looking after aliens and strangers. And it just feels like it's a really topical thing at the moment to be talking about, because we're seeing a lot of discussion about migration, refugee status, asylum seekers, and all of those sorts of things in a world that's totally and utterly disrupted. So I thought I would throw in for us to talk about just a few things about this. And the background to it, if I mention it, is James and I talked about a couple of examples biblically, theologically. One that a lot of people would know, school story in a way, if primary schools do it particularly, the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
Come back to that in a minute. And the other one is that when it gets to a particular point in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus actually makes the point that sitting down with strangers is a really good thing. And we can come back to the actual verse of that in a moment. And I can also quote, and I might do it in a minute, something about aliens, foreigners and strangers. So I just want to get James's initial thoughts on what's your take on the story of the Good Samaritan, James?
The Good Samaritan is obviously like one of the foundational stories of Jesus, right? It's like one of the ones where Jesus really shows you what Jesus is about.
Yeah, go on.
In that Jesus very, very quickly sees to the heart of the person questioning him.
Just in case there's anybody watching,
Yeah, we should probably read it.
do it. Well, I wasn't going to suggest, but reading it
Yeah.
would be quite long.
Yeah.
What about, because you did a brilliant resume at the start there of your life.
Yeah.
Give us a tiny little resume of the Good Samaritan story for us, will you?
All right. So, yeah, okay. So this guy who's like fairly high up in the religious structures at the time
Yeah.
is trying to chat to Jesus about, well, quite a lot of theological points, mainly to try and catch Jesus out. And one of the things he asks about is, he asks, who is my neighbour who I'm supposed to be,
Yeah, that's
looking out for and being nice to
absolutely.
and, being a friend to. Partly the motivation seems like it might be to try and get away with not helping some people. Is the kind of subtext that we sort of see behind the question. And Jesus is like, all right, I'm going to tell you a story, because Jesus knows that everyone learns better through stories. And so he kind of like drops in this story about this person who gets beaten up, tossed to the side of the road.
Yeah.
A couple of important religious people
It would be, wouldn't they?
try and get out of the way.
Yeah.
And not help the person get away with not doing their duty of care to a fellow human being.
Yep.
And then someone comes along who isn't part of the religious establishment,
Well, less than that, really.
who is actually hated
Yeah.
by not just the religious establishment, but the rest of society as well.
Yeah.
And that's the person who helps the person who's been beat up.
It's a brilliant story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I mean, it just makes me think of walking down Trelawarren Street, and if somebody was in a doorway,
Yeah.
which actually is quite a common occurrence, because
Yeah.
you often see people begging or sitting there in the doorway in not very good circumstances, and it is so easy to think, I don't know how to respond to this, or I'm too busy, or and to walk on by. And me in my minister's garb, not that I would be much these days, but if I was, could easily be, if I'm
Yeah.
not careful, the person who walks by in that story.
And I think we all could be, and I think we all have been. One of the interesting things to do with the Good Samaritan is to put ourselves sort of as a mental exercise in place of each of the different characters. So sometimes we're the person that's been beat up and tossed on the side of the road.
Yep.
Sometimes we're the, important person walking on by.
Or think we are.
Or think we are, yeah. And sometimes we're the Samaritan who can stop and help people.
Yep.
And I think
It's an interesting thing you say. I'm butting in, but it's just to make sure the point, people notice the point that you actually said, which I didn't know you were going to say, that sometimes you would identify with the person who's in the doorway. And I think that's so helpful for some people to understand that different circumstances in life change things.
Yeah, well, there's some people who need to be encouraged to empathy by putting themselves in the place of the person that's been harmed. Some people don't naturally see the empathy of someone's being harmed. I need to help them. They have to then put themselves in that position to encourage those emotions out of themselves. And we could go into very deep reasons as to why that is. Most of them are societal and cultural. Because I genuinely believe that every single human being is capable of empathy if they are allowed to be, by their cultural
But it might be also that someone's background has taken them away from feeling that that's what they could either do or want to do because of the way they might have been brought up or educated or whatever.
Yes, exactly that. And I just think it's really important to acknowledge that we aren't just one of the people in the story at all times, that as humans we go through being at all these different stages. Of life. And we need to own that.
So how would that relate to, I mean, we may not even get to the Matthew story I mentioned earlier, and let's see how we go, but how does that relate to people who are from different cultures in the UK, for example, who might mix, or from overseas coming into our nation and vice versa? potentially us going elsewhere. I sort of notice if I, on the odd occasion I go abroad, you're going into a place that's very different. So, any thoughts on the alien, stranger, foreigner, refugee, asylum seeker kind of thought process with relation to this?
So there's a few stories I could tell that actually relate to this from modern day that have happened sort of in my life that I've seen. I got permission to tell one of them because I knew we were going to be talking about this.
Go on then.
So I texted my
I'm
friend
intrigued.
last night and I was like, can I tell this story?
Yeah.
So my friend Lloyd, who is one of the best people alive, I've got a lot of love for Lloyd. He deeply cares about others and is a very honourable person. Really helped me when I was at some of my lowest points. So in that respect, he's been the Samaritan, right?
Yeah.
But one time we were going to a church together, and we walked into the church, and because Lloyd to look at in the street is a proper old school punk, right? We're talking mohawk, we're talking, patchwork trousers, we're talking all of it, right?
Okay.
And we went into the church, and as we came in, someone came up to us who I knew, but that Lloyd didn't. And that person assumed Lloyd had never been to church before. Immediately. So we're like, oh, right, so this is your first time in church. It wasn't, is this? It was, this is your first time, so come and do this and that. What that person didn't know, because they were judging instead of curious, was that Lloyd's dad works in the Church of England as a vicar, and Lloyd has spent his entire life around churches, and not just that, but churches all over the world, including in Zambia, where he spent quite a lot of time.
Okay.
And that was just one of these examples of the assumption of your role in someone's life.
Yeah.
So this person from the church that we went to assumed that they were the religious one and were therefore the one who knew what needed to happen, when actually that wasn't the case. So in a way, they kind of made themselves the religious people who just sort of rushed on by without actually looking at what was going on and working out what was happening.
And although it may not have happened to him, I presume that if Lloyd had walked into somewhere else, he may well have got a completely different sort of welcome that was nothing at all to do with the Good Samaritan story of a Christian person who's not really taking it on board.
No. And actually, there have been churches that both me and Lloyd have been to where we would not have been welcome at all, and have not been welcome. And like that story of people walking on by plays out in the church every single day. I know of a story like that going on right now.
Yeah. But it plays out as well, doesn't it, in society in different ways? I mean, not taking a religious stance so much on it, but people assume things about other people, don't they? All the time. And I think we're all guilty of, to some extent, prejudice, even if we don't think we're prejudiced.
Yes.
And, we make assumptions. We see someone and we say, oh, that's that kind of person. And they're not.
No. Another story I'd like to tell is about that same church, right? It was one I was at regularly, and this relates to the who is my neighbour thing.
Okay.
So I would go there regularly and I would always draw, right? Because that's what I do when I'm in a big church setting. I'm autistic. It's overwhelming. Also, it's the way I pray is I draw. The way I connect with God is I draw. So I'll sit in church and I will draw. One time I forgot my sketchbook, right? And the same person who'd gone up to my friend Lloyd came up to me and said, oh, it was nice to see you not drawing this week. And I was like, yeah, I just forgot my sketchbook. And then...
Did they know your background?
They knew me very well.
Right.
And that was a very frustrating encounter. The next week, I went to a poetry event. And I sat I was actually at the front of this poetry event. I was drawing, and every single one of the poets who'd performed came up to me excited to find out what I was drawing, because they were really excited that someone was doing art during their set.
Okay.
Who was my neighbour?
Yeah, who was?
Right?
Having said that, if the person knew you well
Yeah.
and probably got on with you to some extent in that, could it be construed that they just put the wrong words out and they didn't mean anything negative, or do you think it was a negative statement?
From that particular person, it was a negative statement. Right. However, there were other people from that church who were friends of mine. One guy particularly called John, who actually a couple of weeks later checked on me to see if I was okay.
Right. Okay.
Over the same incident.
Right.
Over the fact that I didn't have the sketchbook that one week. He was like, "Are you all right? Like, did you cope okay with it?" And like, so it really is a mixed bag of. Yeah. I did have a neighbour from that church, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very difficult to say that it was that church that was a problem, because there were many people from that church.
Okay, let's change tack a bit, James. Let's just change tack so that we get in a couple of different ideas into this, if we can, and see what you think, and see how the conversation goes. Let me go back for a moment to the kind of some of the Old Testament examples of the way things are phrased, and the fact that certainly thousands of years ago, in cultures that are totally different, the way people responded to people in a hospitality sense, etc., tribal sense, nomadic sense, and whatever, is different to a lot of cultures that we live in now.
Yeah.
So we have to at least rethink things a little bit. But I've got a couple of statements here, biblical statements. So one is, "You shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt." That's in Exodus 22. Or in Leviticus 19, it says, "When a foreigner resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them, love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt." I just wondered if you had any thoughts on culture and how we respond, and whether some might argue that those sorts of phrases are not relevant anymore because we don't live like that anymore. Or is that just... I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that.
I think one of the big mistakes people make is they take literal logistical examples from the Bible instead of taking principles. Right?
Okay. So what's the principle here, do you think, then?
The principle here is, if you've got a stranger, you treat them well, right? You treat them with respect. If you've got someone who is new to the area, no matter where they came from, it's your job to help them connect with the area and connect with the people around them.
Okay. Interesting.
Right, that's a principle, right? That's the idea.
Well, I can relate to that. It might sound strange, but as somebody who was originally born in Hampshire, lived for 20 years in Lancashire, and then came to Cornwall, you hear all sorts of stories which are not really that true about, well, you're an Emmet, and you're going to be treated differently. In fact, I heard that at one point from a minister I knew in Lancashire, who was a Cornish guy, born and bred in Cornwall, who said to me, I shouldn't, whatever you do, don't go near Camborne. Almost. It was almost like, you'll be all right in Falmouth, but you won't be all right. It was almost that kind of statement. I mean, he's a lovely guy, don't get me wrong, and I think he was just trying to give me an idea that it's very Cornish, which it is. But I have to say that pretty much universally, and not entirely, the welcome here has been as good, if not better, than anywhere else I've attempted to live. Why should anybody give me hints like that? It's just an interesting way that we behave in slight cultural differences between different parts of our own nation, let alone elsewhere.
I mean, as a white guy who's never lived outside of the UK, I've never sort of fully experienced a cultural shock in the way of, I'm coming into a place that is, radically out of my experience so far in life. However, I can give two examples of one of welcome and of being, supported and welcomed into a community, and one where I was not welcomed into a community.
Okay.
So we'll start off bad and get better. The one where I was not welcomed was we moved to a particular place, a particular area, and that area was a very kind of very, very small place, very insular. It was a community that had hardship, for many, many years.
Okay.
The sort of towns that were decimated by Thatcher, those sorts of places, right? And we went there and we were not welcome. We weren't wanted. My dad was the minister in the church. Like, the church didn't want to be ministered by someone who wasn't born 5 minutes down the road. The culture didn't want people in the village that had been from, the next valley over. And this wasn't in Wales. And we very quickly, we'd have stuff thrown at the house, windows broken, all of that stuff, where we just were not welcomed into the area at all. We were not wanted, and we were very aware of it from the start to the finish. And as soon as we could move, we did move, right?
Okay.
Whereas when I got to Swindon, which is and people are going to object to this, but it's a beautiful town. I love Swindon a lot.
Why shouldn't you?
We went there, and I went into a local cafe, and I went into there 3 times in 1 week. And by the end of that, not only did they know my name, but they knew what I was going to order. And the next week, they knew what days I was likely to go in. And so they had a cup of tea waiting for me. I was welcomed into a community almost immediately, where I felt like actually my presence there was wanted and valued. And I spent a lot of time in that community, getting to know people in that community. And there were people from all over the world experiencing the exact same. In that community, I had friends from Iran, Greece, Newcastle, all sorts of places.
Yeah.
And everyone was like drawn in, welcome, had value, was able to be part of the community we were building there. And it's such a radically different experience.
Well, it must feel so much better.
Yeah. It's like, it's positively radicalizing, if you know what I mean. So it radicalizes you to want community, to want to build community. And it has a knock-on effect to all the things that happen. From that place, art, music, poetry, all exploded because it was a place of welcome.
Yeah. In other words, it affects lives.
Yeah.
What about this then? Just come back for a minute. I'm going to touch on the Matthew 25 one that you and I just chatted. Well, we shared that we might talk about it. I've got it written down here as this in Matthew 25. Jesus equates the treatment of vulnerable strangers to his own treatment, stating, "I was a stranger and you invited me in." What do you think? What's your take on how we learn from that in the society these days? I was a stranger, because it relates a lot to your example you've just given, doesn't it? You were, you were strange. I suppose you soon weren't a stranger, but in Swindon, if you just moved there, how you were responded to, and it's a red letter. This is a red letter line. This is what Jesus said. If we think he was the Son of God, and obviously lots of people might say he isn't, or they don't agree, or they don't believe, or whatever, but in terms of the power of the words. What's your take on that then?
My take on that is that I've just received instruction and
do it.
I'm going to get on with that because that makes sense to me, right? Like, it makes sense to me,
But some things he said, maybe that one's easy for you because you've seen how you've been helped by a good situation, how you've been harmed by a worse one in the examples you've just given. And so for you, that's that's what I'll do.
It's a no-brainer.
But there are some things that are red letters, words that Jesus has said, where people say, well, I can agree with that, but I'm not quite sure how I do that, or if I can actually respond in the same way. I mean, the simple one might be something like, do not worry about what you eat or what you wear, etc., in the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
And yet people do worry. But, if you haven't got food, you're going to start worrying. Or
Yeah.
if you haven't got a lot of money and you can't feed, the whole thing today with poverty in our nation, I fed the kids, but I can't afford to eat me. They're going to worry. I think there's almost a natural concern. Not easy to take on board a red letter set of words on that.
No, I think for me it is about that, having that, I have faith in, I've seen enough of what Jesus said work
To go with it.
to be like, all right, cool. If all these other things are working, if welcoming the stranger is working, if, doing unto others as I'd have done to me is working, if, feed the hungry, that's working, then I'm going to start to give a bit more weight to some of these other things as well.
Yeah. But then that in itself, you've just mentioned another one. We could always do a complete different session on this. So what does it mean for me to respond to the words feed the hungry? Do I give to the local food bank? Do I send money abroad to X, Y, and Z? Do I? There are ultimately a huge number of variations on a theme there, aren't there?
The one of the greatest bits of advice I received on that is, it doesn't matter what you do something. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter if you give to the local food bank or if you send food parcels somewhere
but you
where
should
there's...
respond in some way.
But do something.
Yeah, just respond. Feed people.
Yeah. But yeah, and it's, it knocks on into everything else. Someone once said to me this amazing phrase, which I really love. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly.
I've heard it before as well.
I love that.
Yeah.
It might have been you that said it to me in the pub.
It wouldn't
maybe.
be me.
Someone said it to me anyway, and I was like, "This is gold," because it's not kind of.
It's better to try than not try.
It's better to do something towards the solution than to do nothing towards the solution, and I think that's something that particularly the organised part of church misses out on a lot.
Okay.
That actually, as people who are trying to follow Jesus, like, it doesn't matter if you reach the end of the path straight away, as long as you take a step in the right direction.
Yeah, go on the journey.
If you see a situation that needs help, just because you can't solve the whole thing doesn't mean you don't sit into the listen to the person that needs help.
Yeah, I get that. James, this has been brilliant. I think we could go on. I know we could.
Yeah,
it would be so easy to just keep going with this conversation, and maybe we will on a similar theme. Can I just say it's been great to just have a bit of variation on a theme here and different ways of putting things. And I'd love to unpack sometime. We'll do it in this biography. Just some of those aspects that you in 2 minutes blitzed about your life. Because I am sure that will be helpful to a whole host of people and maybe wrap the whole faith agenda into that at the same time. So thank you for that.
No worries. It's been a pleasure.
See you again soon.
Yeah, speak to you soon.
Cheers.